Welcome to my viewfinder. Recently I found myself in Toronto for a series of family emergencies, one of which was the passing of my grandmother. My father asked me to take photographs of the funeral service, and when I returned I found out that Alvin had also been asked to take funeral photos for his uncle's passing several years ago. So our discussion today is going to be largely around the strange experience of grieving through our cameras. As mentioned on our social media platform, we do have an open Discord group channel. If you're interested in participating with the construction of this new season of the podcast, look us up. You can email us at mvfpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find us on Instagram at myviewfinderpodcast. I think we were talking about the fine art world, but I feel like if we're going to go there, we should probably do more background research just as far as the history of and the evolution of like galleries and the sort of art market in general. So maybe we should skip that for now.
You want to skip that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it depends how thorough you want to be about this stuff. If we can go off the cuff, we can just talk about whatever we want. But if you want to actually reference shit,
we could go off the cuff for now. Let's start with you actually. How was I don't know if you want to talk about some personal shit, but how was your not getaway, but
yeah, I was away for a while. I had to go deal with a family emergency. So we got word that my grandmother passed away, but she was pretty old. Not to be dismissive, but she's been in a care facility for a few years. She was 98, and I think she had already started kind of a descent in dementia for like the last couple of years. I lost touch with her, so that's
dementia.
On me. And we were, you know, as ready as we could be that was going to happen. So we got a call, let's say on a Friday, if I remember correctly, that she had passed away, and we were supposed to make arrangements to come to Toronto for the funeral. So that's kind of already, you know, kind of a big deal. It's a flight, and trying to coordinate Helen, my wife, and my son, Helen and Emerson, to come down with school, and she had a lot of work stuff going on. And then the next day I got a call that my mom, who had been getting some scans, suddenly needed to do an emergency hysterectomy because they found a massive tumor, and that was actually scheduled the same day as the funeral.
Oh, Christ, dude.
Yeah, so it's kind of...
Damn, sorry to hear all that.
Yeah. So then the plan changed, and I decided to go on my own to be more supportive of my family instead of kind of dragging my wife and my kid out for like, I think I was there for 10 days, and it would have been so depressing and distracting because it's hard, as you know. I mean, you've got 3, but even with just one, to make sure he's not just in the dumps for 10 days, because people are just running around trying to figure out what the fuck to do. And my mom, as I found out when I got there, was way sicker than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of an interesting experience, you know, spiritually, emotionally, and photographically, I suppose, for one moment. My dad asked me to take pictures at the funeral, which I thought at first was super weird because, you know, you're going down to mourn and to be supportive. But I came to the realization that the best way for me to be supportive for my dad, that's in that moment, was just to kind of do whatever he wanted me to do. Yeah, so that first couple of days was kind of bananas. We were setting up the funeral. My mom was getting pre-op checks. We were trying to plan everything, the full gamut. And my dad's old school baby boomer, man. He doesn't even know how to cook an egg. So he's also trying to learn how to do all these family stuff that he kind of pushed on my mom for the last 40 some odd years. So yeah, it was actually it was super stressful and emotional, but also kind of fun. I got to hang out with my dad. We kind of reconciled over the last couple of years, so it was kind of weird to be friendly, but it was great. And I got to see my brother and sister a lot. But as far as the scope of this podcast, on the Friday, so the day of the funeral, so my cousin and my aunt and my uncle flew in from Philly, and they had an open casket. And it's Catholic, but truncated a bit, so it's not the full. You know, Catholic funerals can be huge.
Oh yeah.
So there was a mass. There was a viewing, a mass. The pallbearers brought the casket to the burial site. There was another sermon, if you want to call it that, on the site, and then there was Koreans go for lunch after. I don't know if that's everybody. but they set up at this restaurant.
Yeah, no, Filipinos do that too. It's like a
Yeah,
reception,
yeah,
afternoon
that's right,
reception
reception.
kind of thing, which
Yeah,
is I don't know.
yeah. So I had my camera, and initially I thought I was gonna have to give the eulogy too, but I was able to work on it and then ask my cousin. She's a doctor and she's a year older and much more
Well spoken.
level-headed, I suppose. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I can be well-spoken, I think, but no, she was good, and she kept it really short. You know me, I would have just went on too long. But the weird thing was, yeah, taking photos at your own family's funeral. Like I didn't want to be like you've done events and weddings. Like when you're a hired third-party event photographer, you just run around and
Yep.
get in people's
Yep.
faces and like look for angles.
Yep.
But this thing, I'm trying to be both respectful of my family's space, but also like I'm there for me too. So it was very,
It's very
surreal's
strange.
too strong word.
It's very
Yeah,
strange.
weird.
It's very
Yeah.
surreal. It's a really surreal experience. I know this because I've been in your shoes. In 2016, when my uncle died, I was the guy who was taking photos for the funeral, and he was like my closest uncle to me, and so that was devastating just to have to deal with that. But photographing on the side was took me out a bit, but at the same time, while I was doing the photographing, I was like mourning as well. I was like crying while taking photos.
Yeah.
I wish there was like now that I think about it, I wish there was a third person to like get
Take
photos
pictures
of
of
me crying.
Yeah, man. Meta. Well, it's weird, right? Because like as a photographer, you're positioning yourself slightly outside of the reality of what's happening in front of you.
Yeah, you're trying to be less of a participant, more of a, fly on the wall. That's like, for me, that's sort of the ideal conditions you want to be when you're photographing. But I don't know. Sometimes it's nice to be part of that experience as well, right? Looking back at it, the photos were probably, I mean, I had some pretty decent photos from there. Actually, I could probably find some right now. Here, I don't know if I can share my screen.
Yeah, I might have some too.
Here.
I found myself like, I don't know, it's kind of hard on an audio podcast to look at this, but I was definitely way on the outside, and I don't have a lot of direct portraiture for sure, but like of the face. We also were wearing masks because my mom was in a highly high exposure situation. So,
Mhm.
It's not that personal. I do have some decent ones of people kind of laying flowers on the casket. But even then, I was back and to the corner, and people were walking in front of me, and it was just interesting because I didn't have that instinct to go and crawl crawl up beside the grave to make sure that everything's in frame, right? So,
so I have, these are very private photos, but I'll do my best to try and avoid showing any. Let's do this.
Oh, I used a flash too.
Yeah, use the flash. It was open casket, so I'm really trying to avoid showing
I
anything.
didn't use a flash. I was worried about just being too close to it, Yeah, these are great.
So I'm like crying as well, trying to take these.
How could you not be?
I also took some film shots as well that
whatever.
I have to dig through once more. But there's that one.
And there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
So I'm like crying just as much as these people while my uncle's getting buried. Yeah, that's the hole where he's buried.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Hold on. Let me see here.
So yeah, I was just, using flash liberally because ultimately, well, it's family first of all. If I was a if I was someone who was not related, then I'm sure people would take offense. I'm sure there are people who probably
Noticed
thought
it.
I wasn't family.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then there's one of like the dogs pissing on the grave, I think. Which is kind of funny.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like at the end it becomes an event
There's
from the looks of it.
Baby Alvin.
Oh my god, you look like a kid.
I don't know if you want to share something. By all
I don't know
means.
if I can share anything.
If you've even imported them yet.
I got them all in JPEGs. I sent them. The other thing is, my dad wanted them mostly because he wanted to send them to Korea.
Mm.
Let me see. So this one, for example, can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So like, you can see it's a little bit less. Like this is my dad at the end. I didn't really take that many, you know? It was more just trying to record which guests showed up. And you can see I'm kind of like in the back. And no flash. My uncle and my sister, firefighter, in her uniform, which was great. My cousin doing the eulogy. You can see like super high ISO. The colors all fucked up. It was
Yeah.
hard in this church. They had sunlight that was coming in like magenta. They had like a fucking incandescent bulb. They had all kinds of crazy cross colors. So looking at yours, just on a technical standpoint, if I had been able to use artificial light, might have been cleaner. But you know, that's fine.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, like I don't know, man. It was interesting. It was an interesting experience. Stop streaming.
There you
Okay.
go.
How did the stream go? Sure. Fine. Uh, yeah. And you know, I met my friend after his mother passed away a long time ago, and we you know, I kind of worked with him through that, and he told me that it wasn't after a few months that it really hit him. He said he was just driving one day and had this total emotional collapse on the road because you know, there's so much to do that processing the grief is, you know, you'd expect like in movies people are freaking out and wailing, and you know, there's going to be some of that, of course. I was, you know, I was crying trying to take these pictures and watching my dad. Like my mom couldn't come, but it's just one of those things, right?
Yeah, it's a slow burn.
Yeah, man.
'Cause when you get
I'm
the news,
expecting the
well, I
reality
don't
to
know,
hit
I
me.
don't know about you, but when I got the news about my uncle, I was, you know, in a state of shock. So then I booked a trip immediately down there, the weekend that they were gonna do the funeral, and seeing everyone, you know, it was great. Things seemed normal, and I was just vibing how I usually do whenever I visit. This was in Vancouver, and it everything seemed normal. Just my uncle was out of the picture, and then as soon as we go to the funeral home, I'm like, all right, like here we go, right? I'm just bracing myself, and then as soon as I like see the open casket, it's like it's just real, you know. And then you know, just like just this wave washes over you, and a sense of reality hits you, and you're just like, holy shit, this person is not coming back, right? Yeah, it's a slow burn. Like things seem normal, right? You're caught up with so much other shit, and then when it hits you, it's a really sobering realization, especially if it's someone really close to you.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, you know, this camera is kind of a shield. I mean, I was still part of it. You know, I got to hold my family and, you know, hug my dad, my cousin, my brother and sister, and we have a very small family, as you can kind of see from the pictures. We didn't have a lot of people there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, for sure, if it had been a wider and larger event in the scope of having to be a photographer instead of a grandson or a son, you know, would have even made it more odd. But I did get some quiet moments to myself. But I also, because I have a task to do, don't sit there for 2 hours and just like get stuck in, yeah, grief or thoughts or participating in it as an event. It's kind of like, yeah, shooting any events like that,
Yeah.
right? Like when we shoot a concert, shoot a wedding, you're not able to like listen to the music or revel in in the newfound love of some couple or whatever the event is. It's fascinating being a photographer. It's like, are you a part of the reality or not?
It is weird, especially when it's a personal event, right? An event as personal as a family death. You want to participate, but at the same time, you're tasked with a job. It's not really a job you have to do, but you kind of want to do. I don't know. It's I think for me, I was able to do both, like do the task and experience the grief and be a part of I don't want to say performance, but part of the participation with everyone.
The ritual.
Yeah, just because, you know, I guess I had my role to play documenting these things, while also, you know, experiencing and sharing the grief that everyone else was also experiencing. It's a totally different story when you're being tasked to photograph someone else's funeral, though. I don't know if you've been in that situation.
No, no.
I have. It's very strange. I don't want to pull up the pictures because it's not my family, but
Yeah.
but
No, I don't need to see it, but do you think that do they feel different? Not like
oh,
emotionally,
they feel
but
very different. Because at this point, I am I am a fly on the wall when it comes to another family. But at the same time, I can't be as intimate. Like I can't be as much of an opportunist in the sense where I can get close. I'm allowed to get close. I can take the photos that I would like to take. You know, I kind of have to be more conservative with my methods. Whereas when it's family, I'm family. I can not do whatever I want to, but kind of teeter the line of getting close enough to the point where it's still respectful and I'm allowed. I'm getting consent.
it's funny. I feel like I would take. No, I don't want to say the opposite, but like I felt very worried about, let's say, in the viewing, coming around to the other side and taking photos of people's faces. I felt like I brought a zoom lens because I was actually positioned sort of on an angle in the back of the room. I didn't even want to be a part of their experience. I don't want them to see me if they're spending time with my grandmother or if they're at the mass inside the church or the apse or whatever. No, the chapel. I didn't turn around and take photographs of the people that attended the funeral service because I also didn't want to make myself that visible, particularly because as Koreans, I'm the first son and all that kind of weird shit. Ironically, most of the older people didn't even realize I was there as a son. They thought I was a photographer until we hit the reception.
Yeah.
So that was definitely in my mind, and not so much what was asked of me as a photographer per se. Yeah, I didn't have, so I guess if you were in the unfortunate situation, I had the second thought, like, would you as a photographer have taken your camera then to take a photograph of your mom? Like, I did not take a single photograph after. So my mom's sick, she's at the hospital, like a cold-hearted documentarian photographer would be taking pictures of all of that.
Yeah,
Would be
yeah,
taking
totally.
pictures of the, house experience, the prep, the hospital visit, all of it. But I'm just not that type of person. I couldn't. I just didn't even think about it.
Yeah,
I
really
don't know. What do you
strange.
think?
I don't
Like I've
know.
seen you.
I think like if it was my mom,
No.
um I guess I'm gonna say if I'm comparing myself now versus back then when I took those photos, me now would probably not do that, but me back then in 2016 would have used photography as a coping mechanism
Mm.
because in a sense I like that was my coping mechanism, right? Well, yeah, I would say it was my coping mechanism as well as, doing something for the family, right? Because if I would just be crying otherwise, right? And I was crying, but I would just be crying and I don't know, feeling kind of, I don't know, not hopeless, but like, what else can I do?
Helpless.
Yeah. So yeah, like using photography then was more of a coping mechanism for me. I don't know, like, who am I to say that I wouldn't do it even now? Right.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's all
I would.
speculation. We don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I changed my mind. Maybe I would. Maybe I would do
Well,
it.
the one thing in my mind that I always thought was different between you and me, like I met you at the mall once accidentally, and you were with your boys. I think it was before your third
I
one was
remember.
born.
I remember that day.
Yeah.
I
And
remember that day.
you had a camera around your neck. And,
Yeah. You were very
uh,
concerned for me because you're like you carry your camera too much. Like do you even No, you didn't say this, but and
No,
I didn't take it
yeah.
this way, but if you were like a fly in the wall, your response would be, "Do you even spend time with your family, or are you just
Yeah,
taking photos
yeah.
of them?"
Like I know you hang out with your boys, and I know that you guys have a fun relationship. But I definitely think stuff like that, like when we have our cameras, are we engaging with the world? Are we observing it from sort of this bubble? And I intentionally don't bring my camera out a lot. And now I have trouble bringing it out even when I want to. We went out for a walk yesterday, and I actually gave Emerson my old OMD because we bought him a little piece of shit camera on Amazon for Christmas,
Yep.
and it broke in a
broke?
week because it's made of garbage.
Yeah.
So he went out and he was taking pictures with that. So I had my camera. I think I only took like 3 frames, but it was fun. It was like a collaborative experience, and it wasn't about getting a picture. It was about just giving him an opportunity to try a different hobby. And I know he enjoys it. He was disappointed because I put a little 35 prime on there because the zoom's too expensive and they're big. and they're heavy.
Yeah.
But he, he had fun. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I was thinking about that a lot on this trip. I was wrestling with this idea of whether that meant I was part of it or separate or both. I don't know. I think with you, it's both. The camera feels like more of an extension of how you interact with the world. I don't know
Of
if it's the same
course.
for me. I'm not sure.
Well, maybe that's something you need to figure out. For me, it's absolutely, I don't want to say, well, crucial as a photographer to just have it on you all the time. Just because, first of all, you get practice, and the more you practice, the better you get at it. Photography as a skill or as a craft is more tangible than as opposed to an art. Because when you treat photography as art, you're just saying you get lucky more often than not, right? Whereas skill or whereas craft, you kind of know what situations you're gonna get yourself into. Like you kind of build your intuition. When you have that intuition, then you have that luck. Then you might strike gold with something, right? So that's why I bring or brought a camera with me all the time, just because just like refining my photographic craft. And then if I get lucky, then I'll get blessed by the photo gods.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, there's a discipline to it.
Yeah.
I find I'm not a disciplined person by, I don't want to say nature, that sounds so like forming, but certainly by habit. I like to think of myself as much more random. It
Just
does hold me
vibes.
back sometimes. Yeah,
You're just running on vibes.
yeah, I just run around, and it's one of the reasons why I do more spray and pray than sitting in a corner and kind of like pre-composing shots, and probably one of the reasons why I enjoy manipulating photographs more than necessarily like, yeah, making them. I don't know what the right verb is in that context, but
Yeah, making them is valid, I think.
when we were hanging out more, like, yeah, 2016, 17, 18, I can't remember, and we were doing a lot more photo walks, it was fun because I think I was practicing with you. So it was like, if we went out and I took however many frames on your lunch hour, or we went out to an event after, whatever we were doing, it was, it's way more energetic that one or 2 years. It definitely changed the way I shoot, but I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get home and I look at what I've taken, and yeah, it's pretty rough shot because I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Even looking through the viewfinder, it's like, I don't think that's what I was looking at.
Yeah. Well, even then, even if you look through the viewfinder and then you're not even sure, just, do it anyway, especially if you're shooting with digital, because you never know, right? Like you yourself may not know how it's going to look like in the process of making a photograph, but it's one of those situations where you shoot first and ask questions later because you might strike gold. It's really a matter of luck.
Yeah, luck's an interesting concept. It's like, if you have a discipline and a practice, and as you call it, a craft, then it's less luck, isn't it? It's more of a probability statement. Luck's a weird thing because it takes away the sense of any intention, control, action. Even it almost feels like you like tripped into a good picture, which I don't think
when I
is
say
true, right?
when I say luck, it's really like what the world gives you, because those are things that you just can't control, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
And especially you can guarantee yourself as a photographer to be at the right spot in this time of day, but it may not be the right time because nothing is happening, right? All the photos that I've taken that people have on social media have asked more questions to me about were the times that I wasn't working hard to get a photo. I just took it, and then at the edit, I was like, okay, this looks pretty good. And then I post it, and then people are asking me, holy shit, like, did you take
How
this,
did this
dude?
happen?
Yeah, like how, like what's going on here? Here, I'll show you. This photo is the one that gets asked the most about. If I could find it right here. Oh shit, it's 2017. Holy shit, was it that long ago?
I'm amazed
Scary.
you have access to your library so succinctly. I couldn't. Mine's like a crate. I couldn't tell you where anything is. Stuff I've printed, I don't even remember where I've stored it.
Shit, I can't find it here. Flickr.
A lot more organized than I am.
I started Flickr again just to
Oh, yeah?
just to have my shit around. It's this photo over here. If I can share my page, share my screen, screen one, go live. So it's this photo right here.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably the birds.
So it's this photo right here. This is the photo that people are asking me questions about because, it's just one of those things where I never really thought about it, but I just took it. And it's one of those photos that just happened, right? I would say I got lucky there just because I didn't purposefully set myself there. I just happened to be in line waiting at the Seattle Vancouver border, and I was at the right spot at the right time without me making that conscious decision. I was just like, oh yeah, this is kind of interesting. I guess I'll take a photo of it. Maybe I'll tilt it a bit to to make
Yeah.
it a little more dynamic, but it's yeah, like as a craft, you can bring your shit. You know your ISO, your shutter speed, your aperture. You know what to set your camera to the correct conditions. But really, as far as the content that you're given, it's really all just luck. Those are things that are out of your control. But those are also the things that you have to work with, right? This is where photography as a craft comes into play. Ideally, set where you're going to stand and at what moment do you want people or things to converge into
Converge.
the frame.
I like we're doing an audio podcast and this fucker starts eating a banana. You asshole.
You're gonna have to hear me. Well, I'm gonna post this video on YouTube anyway. So
Yeah, just going back to the funeral thing. I am reading this book called Doom: The Politics of Catastrophe. It's pretty good. And the first chapter is talking about the culture around death, how we have this catastrophizing mindset as a society that everything's about the end of the world. But one of the reasons why he starts with death is because leading up to probably around the 1900s, the life expectancy was no higher than 50 years. And as you go back, it's shorter and shorter because there was just too much environmental risk, whether it's food quality, disease, animals,
yeah,
war,
and
you
like
name
modern
it.
science, modern technology, modern medical.
Right, all of these things. And he talks about how, as a ritual and as a cultural practice, death was much more in the front of mind and much more a part of the experience of life. So funeral rites and all of these processes that we rely on, these somewhat celebrations, were more normal back then. But somewhere around the 1900s, and he references sort of the death of religion. He brings up Karl Marx. He brings up the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution. But there's this point where humans become scared of death. And now we tuck away old and sick people in hospitals and hospices. We worship the concept of immortality. Funerals now become these like sudden and traumatic events. My grandma's 98. We should have been prepping and celebrating her life probably for the last 15 years. But instead we kind of push it off to the side and we worry about like my health and whether I'm exercising enough and how do I live to be 90, etc. Which there's nothing inherently wrong with that, I suppose, but it is an interesting thing to reflect on because I've just come back from said funeral and I got the double whammy of watching my mom's mortality at the same time. So I just thought it was interesting reading that and then being a photographer at this event and how fucking dour Catholic masses are the worst in general.
Oh yeah,
I mean, they're so
fucking long,
fucking awful. Yeah, man.
It takes way too fucking long.
Ugh, and everybody's so miserable, right? It's like the religion of misery.
Yeah, like it's a cultural thing for sure. But I don't know, funerals in general should, like, they say it's the celebration of one's life, but it sure as hell doesn't feel like a celebration.
No.
It's all fucking doom and gloom. It doesn't help that fucking priests are boring as shit.
Yeah,
so.
man.
Doesn't help that the music's all like fucking organs.
Gothic and yeah.
Well, that's a cultural thing too, right? I'm sure in other places, and I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's a bit more lively and more celebratory.
If you're at an Irish wake, or if you're at I can't think of a specific culture, but one which they'll have an actual celebratory tone. So, I mean, I don't know how African American culture, like in the gospel church, how their funerals go. I think they're still influenced largely by these puritanical and Catholic structures. So I think they must still be, black suits and wailing and fucking shit. But, yeah, if it was the other way and it was actually kind of a celebration, I think photographing it would be like going to a wedding.
Yeah.
But instead, I found myself, very actually very self-conscious and worried about being there in the first place. And so yeah, I read the chapter after I came back, and it made me really question, what even the purpose of having my camera there was. It's weird.
There's, in the grand scheme of things, it's not important.
No.
No.
I mean, do we even want to remember if we're so unhappy that someone died?
Well, I don't know. It's like no one's gonna care about what photos you take or what photos I took unless it was a historic, world-changing event.
Figure or
But
something. Yeah.
but unfortunately, like my uncle's death is not as devastating as, I can't even compare.
The Pope. I don't know.
I don't know. Who gives a fuck about the Pope?
Well, in the Catholic context, when Pope Francis dies, there's going to be 100,000 people.
Didn't he already die?
And then in Argentina, well, he's pretty sick.
Oh, okay. I know nothing.
Well, I don't follow him, but I saw an article on Apple News a few years ago with a photo of him, and my first instinct was like, "Oh, this guy's going to die," because when he first showed up, he's like a youngish pope. I think he was still in his 70s instead of being 90. Like I think when Benedict came in, he looked like he was in his 90s already. At any rate, so the other thing that this book talks about is idolatry, because we lost God, right? I think that's why it brings Karl Marx. He's like, at least pre-socialism, the religious world is about attributing elemental and environmental disasters to the concept of gods. And then we have Catholicism and organized religion becoming a singular figurehead, but it's still external to human experience. And then by the time the Industrial Revolution comes in and Marx writes his book, we've eliminated the external, we've made it internal. And so the cycle, even though we feel like we've excised religion, we're actually worshiping ourselves. And then in a weird way, now we've gone back to idolatry. And you know who would get a fucking high-end photographer and an art book? If Beyonce died, somebody would be paid $10 million to take a picture of that funeral procession, right? That book would become an art fucking coffee table book. Photographer would probably get a celebrity status for being the one hired to do it. And so that's a weird thing to think about, right? Like photography's role in God making right now is very strange. That's a strange.
Why do you think that though?
Wait, which part? That would happen?
Yeah, no, like why that would be why the conditions of this person becoming, I guess, like this photographer being like a micro celebrity from being hired to photograph Beyonce's funeral.
Why would that happen?
Yeah, why do you think that would happen?
Well, we saw that with who is it? Somebody
the
famous
Obama
got
guy?
Married. Yeah, somebody got married once, and the rights to shoot, it might have been Beyonce and Jay-Z, the rights to shoot the wedding and all that stuff was so strict because of tabloids, right? So you couldn't have someone commodify like a cell phone, like a smartphone photograph of being there. There's so many comedy shows now where you have to like tuck your phones away so that you're not live streaming somebody's set, and there's a lot of ownership around the content of images and video now that's basically tied up in law, and conversely, like in commercialism. And I think, maybe I'm being too extremist, but I feel like somebody of that celebrity status dying, especially if they're quote unquote too young, right, in their prime, and not when they're 90 and people have forgotten about them largely. I think it would be a huge, huge market event. I mean, I don't know if I'm crazy.
No, first of all, I agree with you. Second of all, like these conditions are because we live in a capitalist society, right? Not saying that it's bad to make money. It's not inherently bad, but because having a job, providing labor, just any kind of labor, it doesn't allow for people to, make a living, right? So then you have to fucking almost exploit your way to the top, or find these other venues, these other conditions to kind of make it, It's not really there's like no real meritocracy, if you know what I mean.
Well, there never was, and there cannot be.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually make sense as a system. We talked about this in our first episode, but if we want to keep it within the context of the funeral photographs, how you value the pictures of your family and what you might be willing to pay either in barter or as cash price for a photograph, let's say of your parents at a casket versus a random stranger. There's no way to connect those two values, right? If you're an event photographer at a wedding or a funeral, then you can sell it to the clients, presumably, but you couldn't sell it as a coffee table book. when you have someone who's got celebrity status, I was just thinking like, just within the context of a photographer, if we got hired, let's say we opened up a company and I don't know. If it's not Beyonce, let's say Simu Liu, someone Canadian, I don't fucking know. Somebody famous in Canada hired us to shoot some devastating, traumatic funeral. I don't think we're showing up in a street photography, a handheld flash thing. I think you're buying fucking umbrellas, cinematic lighting, right? You're renting giant Hasselblad cameras. It's like, it's a high-end production because it's not even about reality. It's about projecting the importance of this event well beyond the person themselves, in my opinion. I just feel like that's the world that we live in. Look at wedding photography, and I think the few weddings I've shot, I'm not sure if I fulfilled the expectations because I shot it the way that I think is important. I shot people having genuine conversations. I shot people looking happy, but I didn't put in high bokeh, fucking warm light, forced portraiture of people in front of floral arrangements and all this kind of stuff that you see on Instagram or on Pinterest or on wedding photographer advertising websites. Now, I don't want to sound too defiant. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it's just not how I've ever approached making photographs. So it's just fascinating to me. Like, are we here to document? Are we here to project a sense of reality? And in the funeral sense, are we worshiping the people who pass away? Are we worshiping ourselves for being there? I don't know.
That's an interesting point. Oh, I'm chewing.
Fucking banana.
My bad. Okay, here.
Actually, it sounds racist, right? I've been called a banana before.
Yeah. Oh. Here's what I think, and I may not have the correct analysis on this, but yeah, like this kind of goes back to our last talk about how photography is not, well, the way you and I define photography. For me, it's just a matter of seeing what the photo looks like versus what actually happened, right? Whereas this is just more of a, it's marketing, it's advertising. You're illustrating someone's life, right? Or I guess in this case, someone's funeral. You want to make it look pretty. You want it to look grand. And actually, you know what? I maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's maybe you are doing photography. It's just the conditions that you're dealt with are fuck, I don't know, man. It's too much thinking.
Yeah, there's not gonna be an answer. It's just more.
Yeah, just cut my bit out.
No, it's interesting. This is the whole conversational problem. There's no, if we ask any of our friends, the answer will always be different. And it will probably change, like you said, if we asked Alvin of 2016 versus Alvin of 2023, the answer will be different. It has to be, because our situations keep changing. One of the things that happened at this funeral is they did the standard slideshow, and my dad had pulled up, I think, 75 pictures. He was so amazed they had the slideshow done. It was like PowerPoint. But anyways, that's just me being a hater. So these pictures come up, and they're pictures either my dad took or whatever, right? Like they're family pictures, super random. So they're not compositionally great, but they're so meaningful because you see my grandma with me when I'm like 12 or with my cousin, just these events that bring up
like he's nostalgic.
Nostalgia, yes.
Yeah.
So, there was another layer of photography that was there too. And I don't know. I do get hung up a little bit too much on these conceptual, ethical relationships, right? Like I was tied up with the ethics of me being a photographer at a funeral. I was tied up with the ethics of, photography in general in that moment, whether we should be taking pictures at all, and never mind my position in it. But there is actually no right or wrong answer. My dad really wanted my grandma's sister in Korea to see that a funeral was done correctly. So photographs are required, right? Is it good enough to have done it on a smartphone or on those Kodak Insta cameras? Maybe, but he asked me to do it. So I was happy to provide that service for him. And then we see the after effects in the slideshow, which is that having a visual record of these things, whether they're real or not, was quite impactful. I don't know. It's the thing about photography that's so weird. Like, if we had been in the 16th century and they had put up portrait paintings of the family, right? So like if you're part of some elite clan and the matriarch dies and there's no photographs yet, so they have 17 commissioned paintings of family members.
Yeah.
Is that
All
the
fake,
same
by
thing?
the way.
What's that?
All fake, by the way.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
they tried to make them look as hot as possible when really they probably had fucking
But isn't that? But that's the
blemishes.
thing. Like, isn't that Instagram, right? Isn't that what would come up? Let's say
Yeah,
on
it's
if one of us
illustration.
died, like what would the photos look like? Would they be the genuine ones of me, like, 205 pounds drunk and puking on something, or is it going to be the photo that you or Scott or Curtis took of me, like candidly? But because you guys are great photographers, I look so pretty, right?
If
Because
you
like,
died, you're
yeah,
saying if you died, I don't know. I've thought about it too. Like they're definitely gonna show pictures of me with like when I had my hair spiked, which is like absolutely something I do not want to be shown. But I'm gonna be
frosted
dead. I'm
tips,
gonna be
yeah.
dead anyway. No,
Well,
but
I don't mean, yeah, I don't mean necessarily like how I would feel about it, but it's just interesting. What reality is projected there?
I think it's important to show those things because it's almost like a book, a photo book, right? Where it's like look at how this person has lived. You can view them during their like I don't want to say lowest end, like their lowest point in life, but they were once this person and they've just changed throughout the course of their life,
Hmm.
right?
In that sense, I guess not to be rueful, but maybe I ought to have been taking pictures of my mom.
You
This
should,
is the thing about the
honestly.
culture of death, right?
You should.
There's a fear of sickness. So my mom's at the weakest I've ever seen her, but I didn't photograph her. I was crying a lot because I thought it was potentially the last time I might see her going into this operation. And then she came out and she was recovering, and I didn't take photographs of her recovering either. And I don't think any of my siblings or my dad took pictures because that's just not the mode we're in.
Yeah.
But let's say she survives another 10 years. I mean, I don't know what the outlook is yet. We're waiting for all the reports and whether she has to do chemo, etc. But whenever she does pass on, do we not want photographs of this battle that she had? I have no idea, right? It's weird. Should I be celebrating? I mean, she's a pretty tough bird too.
It entirely depends on how you, the photographer, views it. For me, I view it as a sign of respect, right? I think in today's climate, especially with social media and, in the era of, I don't want to make this comparison, but YouTube pranksters and radicalization of people being feared into having a camera phone pointed at them, right? Like we as a people, I think of cameras as a bad thing. Like it's a tool used for malicious purposes. Whereas back then, right? Back then when film was the main medium, most people would have been glad to have their photos taken because it's like, oh, am I going to be on the newspaper, right? Like, am I going to be on something important? And yeah, it's entirely up to you as the photographer to make that moral decision. But for myself and for most of the subjects that I've interacted with, or not subjects, but people, actual people that I've interacted with through my demeanor, they've mainly taken my act of photographing as a sign of respect, right? Or they don't even give a shit. It really depends on the the vibes.
Yeah.
Going back to the vibes, right? Listen, that's your mom, man. If it were my mom, 100% I'm taking those photos because I'm not showing them at their weakest, but I'm showing them at them fighting through their biggest struggles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's how you frame,
Your intent.
yeah, your intent.
Also, I think it's a distinguishing feature of who a person is that calls themselves a photographer. It's not a definition that is binding, I suppose, but I would consider you more of a capitalized PH photographer than me in the sense that the camera is important in the way you tell that narrative. Whereas I would call myself a lower PH because it's still a tool that I gladly participate with when asked to, but it is not a way that it's not something that I view the world through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't want to regret that I didn't take those pictures, but hearing you describe it, I would never have thought about it that way, which is why I didn't take the photos. I didn't even have my camera in the same room when I was sitting, kind of like discussing what was happening with my parents while I was living with them for a couple of days. It was nowhere. It was hidden. It was like in a bag, in a room, in a corner. It was not accessible for 10 days, except for the day of the funeral. Like I didn't even take it out once.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here, like, I keep reiterating this to you, and the more listeners we have, the more they're going to hear me iterate this. Like, I'm from the Winograndian school of photography, where it's like photography is really just about the act of making the photograph. You just shoot first, you ask questions later. And like what Winogrand said, And I'm going to quote him right here. And I think I said this last time we recorded. The way I understand it, a photographer's relationship to his medium is responsible for his relationship to the work, is responsible for his relationship to the medium. So the way I understand it, it's really just how you react to the world. It's not really about what the intentions are. Well, it is on what the intentions are, and the intentions are to make the photograph interesting. But obviously, you're looking at it at a deeper level, which is why do we act on it? And it's because you're dealt with what the world is throwing at you, right? It's almost it's your response to the world. Like it's your reaction to what the world is giving you, right? It's how you, I don't want to say cope, but
Process.
it's like because you find this moment, this event interesting or important, you take the photo because that's what was given to you, right? There's not much else.
Almost.
Yeah, there's like not much else more into it other than maybe like this could be a coping mechanism for you, but ultimately in the grand scheme of things, you are just reacting to how the world is.
We should wrap up there, but I think this can extend to a separate conversation about how do we experience the world? Even the idea of documenting. Am I participating in the world first and then recording with the camera? Like that's a weird thing, right?
Yeah, no, and that's valid. That's why I wanted to kind of analyze the material conditions of how certain photographers made their work, because it's just another case study of what we as photographers try to work around. And that also goes into a deeper connection with, when I say material conditions, it becomes like more of a discussion on, I hate to say it, but like class war and struggle, right?
Yeah.
These are real things. And this also dives into the politics of photography as well. Like how we talked about the colonial eye, right? Did we talk about that last time?
Well, we will. I mean, I think that's super important, especially as two bananas. I think that, right? It's so crucial to understand even our language of photography, which is so fucked up, right? Because we're learning essentially, a colonial medium, and we are programmed culturally to be within a colonial environment, but we have oppressed roots.
Yeah.
We are visibly minorities and in a conflict with where we come from, I think, culturally. So I think that affects how we take pictures as well. Yeah, again, this funeral is interesting. It's a Korean Catholic funeral. Yours is a Filipino Catholic funeral. It's like there's a lot of loaded, it's not just one or the other. There's overlaid cultural requirements and expectations.
Totally. And what I wanted to add is our ancestors, I would say, they experienced the same struggle, but because of their cultures and how different they were, they obviously came to a different outcome, right? Not all Asian people are a monolith, but like we have cultures as well.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if people are not Asian listening to this, we fucking hate each other. So,
and it's really interesting because how you grew up, like because of your culture as a Korean person and my culture as a Filipino person, the way we approach this medium, they're vastly different between each other. Filipinos are party goers, dude. Happy all the time.
Well, yeah, there's the Filipino culture of like enjoying everything for the moment now. I think there's something.
That's
to
why
that.
we have gout, dude. Because we enjoy we enjoy the beer.
And Koreans define life as suffering and difficulty and oppression. So there's quite a lot of residual shame, but also resentment built into the language. So I think there's something to that. Not to oversimplify an entire race of people, but I think it definitely plays a bit.
Yeah. No, totally. All I want to say is not to make this a game of who did it better, but we've been colonized for just over like 400 years.
Oh yeah. No, your island's fucked. Yeah. And like not even never nice periods either. Just a bunch of assholes running through there all the time.
But hey, we make the most of it, right?
We're definitely not qualified to do sort of a ethnographic or cultural cross-section of anywhere we come from, but intuitively there's something important there. We should read books and we'll come back smarter. We
should read books. Fuck, I should read more books. I'm fucking I'm too deep to fucking TikTok and YouTube shorts.
You gotta cut yourself off. It's rotting your brain. I feel like an old man. It's rotting your brain. Okay, man. That's
All
a
right.
wrap. Episode 2 complete.